An appeals court rules against the abortion ban. A chip manufacturer coming to Indiana, plus Mike Braun's FEC fine, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending April 5th, 2024.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, the Indiana Court of Appeals ruled that Indiana's near-total abortion ban likely violates the state's religious freedom protections. A group of anonymous women and the organization Hoosier Jews for Choice sued the state in 2022. They argued the abortion ban violates Indiana's Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Both a trial court and now the Indiana Court of Appeals agree with them, ruling that the ban goes too far in restricting some people's religious beliefs. What that means now for Hoosiers whose religious beliefs conflict with the abortion ban is a little unclear. ACLU of Indiana legal director Ken Falk represents the people in the lawsuit challenging the ban.
If there are women who have these religious beliefs and who need an abortion because of them, I would suggest they contact us. They are members of the class that we represent all these persons now, and they should contact us and we can determine what steps to take.
While the case is not over, Falk calls the latest ruling a major victory. How broad is the impact of the latest ruling? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Elise Shrock, even the ACLU is not entirely certain exactly what the impact is right now of this ruling. So how confusing is this situation for Hoosiers?
Well, it's really confusing, and that's what, again, happens when medical decisions that should be between providers and patients falls into, legislative hands, into the court system. And this is exactly the same question, you might recall, you asked me recently when I was on about transgender care for youth who are mid-transition whose services were halted. And, in this particular case that we're talking about today, there's also the religious impact. And, as the resident church lady, my day job is in a faith space, a Christian faith space. This is unfortunately what happens when you let legislation be dictated by a narrow interpretation of one religion. And it's really unfortunate because I'm also a Christian and I come from a faith background that affirms and believes in transgender reproductive care. So we're kind of at a real inflection point where the supermajority Republicans are going to have to look at whether or not they want to continue going down this path where they allow for this type of white Christian nationalism to dictate the way we're going, because I don't think Hoosiers want this. I don't think this comes from proposals that they're really asking for to help their day-to-day problems, but we continue to find ourselves in the courts wrapped up in these types of battles. It does harm, it's costly to the state, and it sends a bad message nationwide.
In terms of a legislative response, obviously this is going to go to the Indiana Supreme Court, and presumably they will at some point weigh in. Well, they'll weigh in one way or another. But if the abortion ban is broadened, if the restrictions are broadened by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act,
of all things,
right?
Do lawmakers step in and change what that state law looks like? I'm sure there'd be a legislative reaction to it. I mean, it depends on the appeals court remanded the injunction and ordered it to be narrowed. They said it was too broad now, so it will impact fewer people, to the first question, presumptively. Had the legislature gone for a more modest abortion ban, go with the Senator Kyle Walker proposal, go to 15 weeks or go to 12. I mean, don't start with him. Go from 22 to 12. Maybe the court comes back and says there's still reasonable access to this procedure, so it's upheld. I mean, you don't really know, but you went all in for the almost total ban. And this is what you're going to wind up with. You're going to wind up with courts having to sort this out, and then the legislature reacting to it. I mean, if you look at, kind of zoom out and look at the abortion debate nationally for the last 51 years. It took 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. We're seeing a much faster legal system that is reacting to these state bans as they, as they take effect. It's not going to take a half a century to overturn the ban or reinstate access for this reason. States, you're seeing it all over the country. States overshot on the restrictions. They put them on the ballot and they fail. It's going to be a big issue this political season. I know Democrats in Indiana really want it to be the difference maker here. We'll see if 2 or 3 years later, two or three elections later, if that's the case. But it's certainly going to have an impact in places like Florida where it's on the ballot in the general election, right? So,
I want to ask about. Let's play this out and say, let's say the Indiana Supreme Court issues a ruling very similar to what the Indiana Court of Appeals just ruled, which is a narrower injunction, which is to say that anyone whose religious beliefs conflict with the abortion ban means that they can have access to abortion care in Indiana. What the law says and actual access are two very different things, are they not, John?
Sure they are. And in all of these cases, things need to be litigated and resolved. They don't just, there's not a flipping of the switch overnight. You look, for instance, at the neighboring state of Ohio, which had a ballot question about essentially guaranteeing under the state's constitution a woman's right to access to abortion. And guess what? The old laws are still on the books, and now just we're seeing the initiation of litigation to slowly chip away at the prohibitions and bans that are in place.
Right. Which they've been doing for a long time.
Well,
they've been chipping away at it for so long.
Well, the point here, though, I mean, the bans are in place. This is going the opposite direction.
Right.
It's not as if, for those who thought, hey, we enacted this amendment to the Constitution, now tomorrow we can go get an abortion. That's not what has happened, and that's why these things play out, I think, in the manner they do. But keep in mind, the Indiana Supreme Court, we often forget in upholding SB 1, Indiana's very strict abortion statute, also is on record as saying that Article 1, Section 1 of the Indiana Constitution guarantees that women do have a right to an abortion when their lives are endangered and so forth. That's the first time I think that a court had actually in Indiana had said that there is a right. And so now you're arguing about degrees. You've already established that there is that right. It's just what constitutes a harm and what constitutes a genuine threat to physical well-being.
And the Court of Appeals acknowledged that in this ruling, which was like, yeah, we saw what you said in this, but also you explicitly said there's going to be more because we have to figure this out. Now, litigation after litigation. Okay, well, does this mean? What does this mean? And also, I mean, in terms of an impact on the election, I agree that it's not as direct as we see in places like Florida this cycle, but who the Attorney General is starting to matter a lot more when it comes to this, because it's about, well, who's fighting what in court, and also how are we going after doctors, which becomes a major question in whatever Indiana's abortion statute ultimately looks like, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Todd Rokita is taking, a pronounced role not only in the abortion fight, but a number of various topics that he's involved in on the national level. In terms of this ruling, I do think it's interesting, and I think you were getting at this a minute ago, which is, let's say you are someone with a sincerely held religious belief that, life doesn't begin at conception and therefore you should have access to abortion. Obviously, there are several faiths who don't believe that there's life until first breath. And so let's say you can go get an abortion, but where? There's only a few hospitals in the state who are doing them. Many of them are Catholic owned and just refuse to do any abortions, so even though it might be possible, it's not going to be easy still.
Well, and how does someone define a sincerely held religious belief? There's an aspect of Christianity that says you can profess your love of Jesus Christ and the last second of your life and you are saved. So is there my point being
pertain to any religious
my point being, can you on the way to the hospital proclaim your interest, or do you have
a list of those religions,
or do you have to have essentially I've gone to church and I have a attendance sheet that I've been in church for 52 weeks. But that's the thing. I mean,
one of the plaintiffs in this case is a person who doesn't practice any organized religion, but their spiritual beliefs, which are allowed under the explicitly allowed under the Religious Freedom Restoration. I mean, the way the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was written in this state really opened the door for this ban.
And the court
to be
made clear, I mean, the whole idea behind RFRA is that there has to be the least restrictive way of accomplishing your goal. And the judges pointed out, you have exceptions for health, death, rape. So those are, you've set up so that there are the least restrictive.
I want to ask you this, which is, that was an important part of that ruling. It was an important part of the arguments. It was an important part of the trial court's decision. And if it's an important part, if the Indiana Supreme Court says, yes, RFRA is enjoining, a bunch of people can now have access to abortion under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, because of those exceptions, are we going to see those exceptions go away? Is that something that's tenable in the Indiana General Assembly in reaction to this?
I don't know, because I think if it was possible, it would have happened.
Okay.
And where are women going to go for this care?
Yeah.
That's where we would have started, I think.
It's really difficult when, you've had a ban like this in place and people aren't coming to Indiana to practice medicine.
Yeah. And if you do away with the exceptions, how do you explain that Indiana Supreme Court that is essentially unchanged since it said that there is this guarantee under Article 1, Section 1, has somehow disappeared?
It doesn't matter. That won't matter. All right, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we post an unscientific online poll question, and this week's question is the Indiana General Assembly likely to make the state's abortion ban more or less restrictive in 2025? A, more restrictive, B, less restrictive, or C, they won't change the ban. Last week we asked you whether an endorsement from Governor Eric Holcomb would help or hurt Republican gubernatorial candidates. 62% of you say it would help them, 38% say it would hurt them. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Well, a South Korean tech company plans to invest almost $4 billion to build its first U.S. semiconductor plant in Indiana. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Comer-Weiland reports state officials say it will make Indiana a leader in next-generation memory chip production.
The company, SK Hynix, is a top producer of semiconductor packaging, which contributes to technology like GPS, computers, and cell phones. Woo-Jin Choi is with SK Hynix. He says these products are the foundation of artificial intelligence, which will make Indiana a hotspot for business and job growth.
Talented people will be drawn to Indiana, not just for its great community, friendly people, and top-tier basketball, but for the intellectual growth they will find here as it becomes a hub for scientific development.
The facility will be located at Purdue Research Park in West Lafayette. It is expected to create up to 800 jobs by the end of 2030.
Mike O'Brien, Senator Mike Braun, who's obviously running for governor, like many Hoosiers, celebrated this announcement. But unlike many Hoosiers, Mike Braun voted against the CHIPS Act that largely makes this possible. Is he trying to have it both ways?
No, because at the time he wanted to have it one way, and now he wants to have it the other way, but not at the same time. What I think is, what I think is tremendous is that Indiana, I mean, look what's happened in the last 3 months. We've got Google Cloud coming to building $1 billion data center in Fort Wayne. We got Meta coming to South Bend. We've got this chip manufacturer coming to West Lafayette. This is, there is momentum being created in Indiana to
and that sort of
Samsung
matters.
and Kokomo.
That matters.
100%, yeah. And all these people work with each other globally. Yeah. So it's tremendous that Todd Young, Plan A worked. Indiana is becoming a hub for high-tech, futuristic jobs, and Delaney always likes to talk about wage growth. I mean, that's how you do it, right? You create high-tech industries with six-figure on average jobs, and so that's tremendous. I think politically, if you want a comparison, LEAP is interesting to me because like this kind of project, Mike Braun or whoever comes out of this primary is going to cut the ribbon on it. LEAP is more present, right? It's more of a present issue in the governor's race, and so it's been interesting to watch how careful these people have to be, how strident they are in taking a shot at Chambers or being against it or asking questions around it, because they're all conscious that they're going to have to own it. And this is an example of like, well, you didn't even know you were going to own it when it passed, when that legislation passed, but now you've got to, he's got a different role now, right, potentially.
Is this in some ways bad news politically for Mike Braun?
Well, I think it also hit on a week where he avoided a vote on the government spending bill. So it shows like two different ways that maybe he is trying to have it both ways. So that compounded with other news that I think we're going to, that we'll talk about. So it's these types of consistent hits at someone when you've got several other folks politically taking shots. We'll see how it plays out, but I think it likely puts him more on the defensive than he would have anticipated.
And on the flip side, is this Brad Chambers just jumping up and down?
Well, yeah, I mean, I assume IEDC was massively involved in that when he was in charge, and so this is a great announcement that can put you. And frankly, I think this is an announcement that those who are against LEAP can show, see, we can still get major things without this the way they've handled LEAP, where the state puts in all the money, and it's basically a gamble to get someone to come. So this is a little more old school in how it is versus the new the new program they're trying.
We've talked a lot because they've talked a lot about how economic development has become, in some ways, one of the biggest wedge issues in the Republican primary, which is stunning. And does this kind of give folks on both sides of that debate a little something to crow about? If Brad Chambers is, look, the lead I took at IEDC has paved the way for announcements like this, while to the point Niki just made, the folks on the other side can go, yeah, but you don't need to be buying up tracts of land in order to do it.
That's how it will play out, whether that's accurate or not. We know in the political reality, you will seize on what you can use as ammunition. But I don't think this announcement would have occurred without passage of the CHIPS Act. And keep in mind, the CHIPS Act, which was co-authored by Chuck Schumer and by Todd Young, our Indiana, other half of the dynamic duo in the Indiana Senate, representatives from the state of Indiana in the Senate, is beyond just let's fund chip makers. This is about funding through the National Science Foundation in any number of areas, and it's benefiting all of our institutions, public and private, that educate people and equip people to have these skills and to research. And of course, these are all spawn cottage industries. It's like when you have an automotive manufacturer, pretty soon you have suppliers, and it's just this ring of concentric circles with a ripple effect. If there's a downside, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure both sides will claim victory to a certain extent here.
All right, well, Elise alluded to this because, of course, she reads the scripts that I write. Mike Braun's U.S. Senate campaign committee was fined $159,000 by the Federal Election Commission related to campaign finance violations from 2018. The settlement agreement between the FEC and Braun's campaign says that Braun's former campaign treasurer was responsible for failing to correctly disclose loan balances, terms, dates, repayment amounts, and other information for 29 transactions totaling more than $11 million. The agreement notes that the errors were technical in nature. Forbes first reported the $159,000 fine, calling it the second largest ever imposed on a Senate campaign. All right, Niki, before I ask this question, I mentioned a script for the show. Nothing you all say is scripted. The only things that are scripted are the packages that you see and hear that lead into the that present the topics. And certainly, if anyone has ever listened to John Schwantes answer a question, that is not written.
That's just how I told you to say it.
I could not possibly
my response is written on this coffee cup to your retort.
Now, getting to the issue at hand, Niki Kelly, how much does this FEC fine impact Braun's current campaign?
I mean, look, I don't think rarely does one thing make or break a campaign, but I don't think it's been a good week for Mike Braun. I mean, that's a huge fine, one of the biggest in the history of the FEC, and they immediately just blamed a former treasurer. So,
and by all appearances, it is absolutely, it's not just that they're saying it was their fault. It does appear to be the former treasurer's
fault. It was a reporting issue.
Yes, it was genuinely, everybody agreed in the FEC that it was their fault.
Well, I don't actually think so. What the ruling said is that the respondent says it's the former treasurer. The FEC members themselves didn't say it was the former treasurer. That was the response from Mike Braun. And maybe it was, but the point is, as governor, a lot of people are going to do things wrong on your watch too. And at some point, the buck stops with you. On top of that, we've got chip stuff. We've got different people running ads against him on qualified immunity. I mean, he's starting to take some heat, and he's pushing back. And so I don't think this alone will cause anything, but we're starting to see a little bit of shelling of Mike Braun and see if he can come out.
In some ways, is this just the inevitable consequence of being a well-financed front runner in a six-way primary? I mean, not the fine itself.
I was gonna say.
No, that happened years ago. I'm saying, but all these hits against Mike Braun, is that just what happens to a front runner?
I think it's easy to dismiss that, and I think you just gave him a great response to that. May be scripted myself too by him. I don't know. It's problematic when people don't pay attention to the rules, even if it's a former treasurer or a current treasurer or your grandmother who couldn't see correctly when she filled out the form. It's problematic, especially for somebody like Mike Braun. And by that I mean, you can choose a lot of ways to present yourself to the electorate. You can be passionate about an issue. You can be a disciple of democracy. You can be this, or you can be a business person who knows how to make businesses hum. And you know, I'm a technocrat in the best sense of the word. So then when things like this happen, we're assuming that the buck does stop at the CEO, whether that's a company or a campaign, it's harder to explain away that I know how to make the trains run on time unless somebody else is, the conductor is somebody that used to work for me and doesn't know how to make the trains run on time.
I want to ask a little bit about Mike Braun's response to some of these attack ads and attacks that we've been seeing, is that he's trying to fire back as much as possible. Nothing to say that that's a bad strategy, but does it make him seem like he's worried?
No, because I don't think you know what the future holds. Like this middle tier of candidates, by whatever data we've seen that's been made public, that middle tier of Suzanne Crouch and Eric Doden and Brad Chambers, they're moving up, but they're moving together. But if you're Mike Braun, you can't count on that happening with this block of 30% undecided voters. That's a huge number, and so you've got to keep your foot on the gas on all these guys, because you have no idea what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. Maybe there's a gaffe by one of the other ones, or maybe there's a great closing run for, maybe Suzanne just catches fire because she just raised $1.1 million in like 3 days last week, and so she appears to maybe be moving. But the public data is that they're all moving together, which is what Braun needs, because these attacks could pull him down a little bit. These undecideds got to decide where to go, and if they just split evenly, then he wins. But he can't count on that. So to say that he's pushing back and that's a sign of weakness, it's like, no, that's a necessity because they're coming at you.
I mean, this is a point in time, and it has been a bad week, right? It's been a bad week for Mike Braun because, I mean, to John's point, if you're out there saying I'm a businessman, I'm a CEO, I'm not a Washington, D.C. kind of guy, but then you're making things that reinforce the kind of like the things that everyday Hoosiers are not going to be like, oh, what does the FEC say? They're not having the same discourse about like the technicalities. They're
that's why it's effective, right?
Yeah, they're looking at this guy,
a fine
and
for
they're
a campaign
looking
finance
at millions
violation.
of dollars, and it's furthering that sentiment that. Of corrupt politicians. Yeah. So it's for him, it's a bad week because he's, if you're taking credit for a ribbon cutting that seems disingenuous, you're getting fined, you're not voting. Bad week, but to your point, it is a point in time. We'll see what happens.
All right, the Indiana Democratic Party is focused on flipping at least 4 seats in the state house this year, as doing so would break the supermajority Republicans have had for more than a decade. Indiana Democratic Party Chair Mike Schmuhl says breaking the supermajority gives Democrats a greater ability to stop, slow, or change what he calls harmful legislation. And Schmuhl says his party can flip seats by providing voters with quality choices, candidates that are focused on solutions to real problems.
I feel like you can only go so far as a political party before you kind of tip over. And I think that the Republican Party is very, very close to tipping over.
A focus of the party's strategy is suburban districts around Indianapolis, and candidates like Josh Lowry say a key message is the need for greater accountability and transparency.
Breaking the supermajority is healthy for democracy.
Republicans have had a supermajority in the state Senate since 2010 and in the House since 2012. John Schwantes, is 4 seats achievable in one cycle?
I think it's achievable because you have demographic changes around population centers. Like, 50 years ago, you wouldn't find Democratic victories in almost anywhere in Marion County. I mean, it was rock solid Republican. So that changes. And then keep in mind, we often forget that there are local elements to these races, that candidates are not just somebody on a television ad, but in many cases are the local football coach or the insurance broker or the pastor or the this. And I think it's at our own peril that we forget that comes into this as well.
All right. Finally, the Purdue men's basketball team will play in its first Final Four since 1980 this weekend. Elise Shrock, who are you taking to win it all, Purdue or the field?
Listen, my tia, my mama, they're both proud Purdue alum. I know better than to incite this type of consternation into my life, so boiler up, baby, let's go.
Purdue or the field?
I'm an IU grad, but it's just kind of fun. So
Yeah.
let's go for Purdue.
I'm not picking against UConn, who is wiping the floor with everyone who comes up against them. But also,
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
He's against Purdue.
But also a big shout out to the Indiana State Sycamores, who unfortunately lost in a gut-wrenching loss last night in the NIT championship. But what a season they had! They should have been playing in the NCAA tournament. That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at WFYI.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.